Imagine being fired from the very company you created, only to return years later and transform it into the most valuable brand on earth. This isn't a Hollywood movie. This is a story of Steve Jobs, the visionary who put 1,000 songs in your pocket, who made computers personal, and who redefined how we live, work, and dream. But Jobs' journey wasn't a straight line to success. It was filled with rejection, failure, and heartbreaking struggles that shaped a man who would one day change the world. So, let's dive into the extraordinary life of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was born on February 24th, 1955, in San Francisco, California. But right from the beginning, life handed him an unusual start. His biological parents, Joan Schiebel and Abdel Fattah Jandali, a Syrian graduate student, gave him up for adoption. He was adopted by a loving couple, Paul and Clara Jobs. Paul was a machinist and mechanic, while Clara was an accountant. They weren't wealthy, but they promised to give Steve all the opportunities they could. From a young age, Steve showed a fascination with electronics. He would sit in the garage with his father, tinkering with tools and learning how machines worked. But Steve wasn't your average child. Teachers described him as intelligent, but restless. He got bored easily and often caused trouble at school. One teacher once said, "Steve would test me all the time, but when I caught his attention with something exciting, he became unstoppable." And that word, unstoppable, would define him later in life. As a teenager, Steve grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley. He lived near engineers and innovators who were building the early foundations of the tech industry. At 13, he boldly called up Bill Hewlett, the co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, and asked for spare parts to build a frequency counter. Hewlett not only gave him the parts, but also offered him a summer job. That same curiosity led Steve to meet another teenage boy who shared his passion for electronics. Steve Wozniak, a brilliant engineer with a playful sense of humor. Their friendship would change technology forever. But Jobs wasn't only into gadgets. He was also deeply interested in art, design, and even spirituality. He experimented with Eastern philosophy, visited India, and practiced meditation. These influences gave him a unique way of thinking. He wasn't just a tech geek. He wanted technology to feel human. In 1972, Jobs enrolled at Reed College in Oregon, but within just 6 months, he dropped out. Why? He later explained, "I couldn't see the value in spending my parents' savings on an education that didn't inspire me." Instead, Jobs began auditing classes that actually interested him. One of those classes was calligraphy. At the time, it seemed useless. But years later, when he designed the Macintosh computer, that knowledge of fonts and typography would revolutionize digital design. Jobs said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards." This was one of the first lessons of his life. Sometimes, the things that seem random today will become priceless tomorrow. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple Computer in Jobs' parents' garage. Their first product, the Apple I, was hand-built and sold for $666.66. Then came the Apple II, one of the first mass-market personal computers. It was a huge success and turned Apple into a fast-growing company. By 1980, Apple went public. Jobs, at just 25 years old, was worth over $200 million. But Jobs wasn't satisfied with money. He wanted to create products that would change the world. He had a vision of making computers not just for engineers, but for everyone. This led to the creation of the Macintosh, launched in 1984 with that famous Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott, the one that promised to show why 1984 won't be like 1984. The Macintosh was beautiful, friendly, and unlike anything before it. But despite the hype, sales struggled. Jobs' perfectionism, passion, and sometimes abrasive personality created tensions inside Apple. In 1985, the unthinkable happened. After a power struggle with Apple's board of directors, Steve Jobs, founder of the company, was forced to resign. He was devastated. Later, he recalled, "I didn't see it then, but getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." Jobs felt embarrassed, rejected, and lost. But instead of giving up, he started over. Jobs founded a new company called Next. The products were ahead of their time, especially in software design, but commercially, they failed. Nexton achieved the breakthrough Jobs had hoped for. At the same time, Jobs bought a small computer graphics company from George Lucas. That company would become Pixar Animation Studios. For years, Pixar struggled too. But in 1995, they released their first film, Toy Story. It was the world's first feature-length computer animated movie, and it became a massive success. Pixar went on to create hits like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Up, redefining animation forever. Through Pixar, Jobs proved he wasn't just a computer guy, he was a storyteller, too. In 1997, Apple was struggling, nearly bankrupt. The board decided to bring Jobs back. His return marked one of the greatest comebacks in business history. Jobs slashed unnecessary products, simplified Apple's lineup, and focused on design and innovation. In 1998, Apple introduced the iMac, a colorful, playful computer that brought life back into the company. It wasn't just a computer, it was a statement. Then came the real game changers. 2001, the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. 2007, the iPhone, a phone, an iPod, and internet communicator all in one. 2010, the iPad, a device that reimagined portable computing. Jobs had a gift. He didn't just create products, he created experiences. He made people feel. Jobs was known for his obsession with detail. He cared about how a product looked on the outside and the inside. He once said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." He could be tough, demanding, and even harsh. But those who worked with him admitted, his relentless drive pushed them beyond what they thought possible. One Apple designer said, "Steve would push you so hard, you'd think you'd break. But then, you'd do the best work of your life." Beyond Apple, Jobs was a husband and father. He married Laureen Powell in 1991, and they had 3 children together. He also had a daughter, Lisa, from an earlier relationship. Jobs' personal life was complex. For years, he denied paternity of Lisa, which created pain in their relationship. Later in life, he reconciled with her, but it remained one of his biggest regrets. In 2003, Jobs was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. True to his nature, he tried alternative treatments at first, delaying surgery. Eventually, he underwent medical treatment, but the disease kept returning. Despite his illness, Jobs continued working passionately at Apple, unveiling products that shaped the future. But on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned. Apple stores became shrines filled with flowers, notes, and lit up iPhones in tribute. Steve Jobs' legacy goes far beyond technology. He taught us that innovation isn't just about circuits and code. It's about art, design, and the human experience. He once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." Today, Apple is one of the most valuable companies in history. Pixar is a symbol of creativity. And the devices Jobs dreamed of are in the hands of billions of people worldwide. Jobs left behind a world forever changed by his vision, his stubbornness, and his genius. Steve Jobs' story isn't just about success. It's about resilience, failure, and the courage to follow your passion, even when the world says you're wrong. So the next time you pick up your iPhone, watch a Pixar movie, or design something beautiful, remember the man who once stood in a garage and believed he could put a dent in the universe. Because he did.